"I think you should sit down for this," my father said, his voice carrying that familiar authoritative tone that always preceded terrible news. I was already seated at our family's antique mahogany dining table, where we'd shared countless Sunday dinners and family meetings over the past 30 years. My name is Alexandra Carter, and at 35, I was about to discover just how little my parents understood me. The estate had been in our family for 4 generations. The sprawling Victorian mansion, with its wraparound porch and meticulously maintained gardens, was more than just a house. It embodied our family's legacy. I'd spent my childhood exploring its hidden corners, dreaming of the day I'd raise my own family within its walls. "Your mother and I have been discussing the estate's future," my father continued, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses in that nervous way he had. "We decided it's best if it goes to Michael." Michael, my younger brother by 3 years, had never shown any interest in the property beyond using it as collateral for his failed business ventures. I maintained my composure, and years of business negotiations served me well. "I see," I said quietly, sipping water to hide whatever emotion flickered across my face. "It's for the best, dear," my mother added, reaching across the table as if to pat my hand. I subtly moved it away, placing it in my lap. "Michael has such grand plans for the property, and you're always so busy with your little real estate projects." Little real estate projects. That's what they call the empire I'd built from scratch over the past decade. While Michael had bounced from one get-rich-quick scheme to another, I'd been methodically building something substantial, something they'd never bothered to understand. "Michael knows the importance of family tradition," my father continued, gaining confidence from my silence. "He'll preserve the estate exactly as it should be." I thought about the properties I now own across 3 states, the developments I'd carefully planned and executed, and the wealth I'd accumulated. At the same time, they assumed I was playing at business. They had no idea that their precious estate could fit in the lobby of my latest hotel development. "When did you make this decision?" I asked, my voice steady. "Well," my mother shifted uncomfortably, "we've been thinking about it for some time. Michael's been having some financial difficulties lately, and with the baby coming." There it was. Michael had gotten himself into trouble again, and my parents rushed to his rescue once more. The fact that he'd gotten his newest girlfriend pregnant added urgency to their decision. "I've spent my entire life learning about this estate," I said carefully. "I know every inch of it, every repair it needs, every improvement that could be made." "That's exactly why Michael needs it more than you do," my father interrupted. "You're already established. You have your projects. Michael needs a fresh start. A fresh start, like the fresh start they'd given him when he lost their money in that cryptocurrency scheme. Or the fresh start after his failed restaurant venture, or the yacht business that never made it past the planning stage." I stood up slowly, smoothing down my silk blouse. "Thank you for telling me," I said in a perfectly controlled voice. "I have a meeting to get to." "Alexandra," my mother called after me, "don't be difficult about this. It's what's best for the family." I turned back, allowing myself one small moment of satisfaction. "I understand completely," I replied. "You're right, I do have my projects to focus on." As I left my car, I pulled out my phone and made a call. "James, move forward with the Riverside development." "Yes, all of it." My family didn't know that I'd spent the last 5 years quietly buying up every piece of property surrounding our family estate. The little real estate projects they dismissed had given me control of the entire area. While they focused on preserving the past, I built the future. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. I threw myself into work, finalizing plans that had been in motion for months. Probably relieved by my apparent acceptance of their decision, my parents barely contacted me except for the occasional group text about Michael's impending fatherhood. Then came the day of the formal announcement. My parents had arranged a family gathering with champagne and their usual circle of friends. The perfect setting to crown their golden child publicly. I arrived on time, dressed in a tailored black dress that probably cost more than Michael's monthly salary. Not that they would notice or care. "Alexandra," my mother called out, rushing over with a glass of champagne. "I'm so glad you could make it. Michael was worried you might not come." I accepted the glass with a smile. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Michael was holding court near the fireplace, and his pregnant girlfriend Jenny was beside him. He'd at least tried to dress up, though his suit looked like it had seen better days. "Sis," he called out when he saw me. "Come here." I want to tell you about my plans for the place." I walked over, noting how our parents beamed at this display of sibling harmony. Michael launched into an elaborate description of his vision for the estate, which mainly involved converting the garden into a putting green and turning a library into a home theater. "Sounds fascinating," I said when he finally paused for breath. "I have some news of my own to share." My father clinked his glass, gathering everyone's attention. "Before that, I have an announcement to make." He cleared his throat, adopting his most patriarchal pose. "As you all know, this estate has been in our family for generations. Today, I'm proud to announce that it will pass to my son, Michael, who will carry on our family's legacy." Applause filled the room. Michael puffed up like a peacock while Jenny clutched his arm, practically glowing with pride. Thank you," my father continued. "Michael has some exciting plans for the property, and we're confident he'll be an excellent steward of our family's heritage." I waited for the applause to die down before speaking. "That's wonderful news," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room, "and it ties in perfectly with my announcement." My mother's smile faltered slightly. She knew that tone in my voice, even if she didn't often hear it. "As you all know, I've been working on some development projects in the area," I continued. "Today, I'm pleased to announce that Carter Development will be breaking ground on Riverside Plaza next month. A $500 million mixed-use development will transform the entire neighborhood." The room went silent. My father's champagne glass froze halfway to his mouth. "The project will include luxury condominiums, high-end retail space, and a 5-star hotel," I continued, pulling out my phone to project the renderings onto the living room wall. "We've acquired all the surrounding properties over the past 5 years. The entire area will be completely revitalized." The images showed a stunning modern development that would dwarf our family estate. In the renderings, the Victorian mansion looked small and dated compared to the gleaming towers that would surround it. But that will completely change the neighborhood's character," my mother stammered. "That's the point," I replied smoothly. "Progress is inevitable. The area needs updating, and Carter Development is proud to lead that change." "You can't do this," Michael burst out. "This is our family home." I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "I can. All the permits are approved. The financing is in place, and construction starts next month. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll enjoy watching the neighborhood transform from your putting green." My father had gone pale. "Alexandra, we should discuss this." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied. "This is business, just like your decision about the estate was business." I raised my glass. "To progress." The room erupted into chaos. Friends whispered among themselves. Michael started arguing loudly with our father, and my mother seemed faint. I slipped out quietly, but not before hearing one of my father's friends mutter, "Did you know her company was worth that much?" In my car, I finally allowed myself a small smile. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Contractors confirmed for next month. Everything is on schedule." I typed back a quick response. "Perfect. Time to show them what my little real estate projects can do." The family estate might have been my childhood dream, but I built something far better. An empire of my own on my terms. And this was just the beginning. As I drove away from the house that was supposed to be my inheritance, I felt lighter than I had in years. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting what you wanted, showing everyone that you never needed it in the first place. The following day, the calls started pouring in. My office phone started ringing the following day before I finished my first cup of coffee. The caller ID showed my father's number for the 3rd time in an hour, so I put it to voicemail and focused instead on the stack of contracts on my desk. "Miss Carter," my assistant Sarah poked her head in. "Your brother is in the lobby. He's quite insistent about seeing you." I glanced at my Cartier watch, 9:15 a.m. It was earlier than I'd expected, but Michael had never been known for his patience. "Give me 5 minutes, then send him up," I replied, turning to my computer to pull up the development plans. I wanted all my ammunition ready if we were to have this conversation. Michael burst through my office door precisely 4 minutes later, his face flushed and his tie askew. He stopped short when he saw my office, his eyes widening as he took in the floor-to-ceiling windows and the panoramic view of the city skyline. "This is your office?" he asked, momentarily distracted from his anger. "One of them," I replied coolly. "I have others in Boston and Chicago. Please sit down." He remained standing, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "You have to stop this development, Alex. You're going to destroy everything." "The only thing I'm destroying is outdated infrastructure," I said, turning my monitor so he could see the plans. "The Riverside Plaza project will bring thousands of jobs to the area, increase property values, and generate millions in tax revenue for the city. But the estate will remain exactly where it is," I cut him off. "Though I imagine the construction noise might interfere with your putting green plans." He slumped into one of the leather chairs across from my desk. "Why are you doing this? Is it because Mom and Dad chose me?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Chose you?" "Michael, they didn't choose you. They're rescuing you just like they always have. The only difference is that they're using my inheritance to do it this time." "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "No, it's not," I agreed. "But neither was watching you squander every opportunity they gave you while they dismissed everything I built as little projects." I pulled up another document on my screen. "Did you know that Carter Development's annual revenue is more than 10 times the family estate is worth? That we employ over 500 people? That we have development projects in 3 states?" Michael's face had gone pale. I had no idea." "Of course you didn't. Neither did Mom and Dad. They were too busy worrying about your latest scheme to notice what I was building." "But why didn't you tell them?" I leaned back in my chair, studying my brother. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of pity for him. Would it have made a difference? They've spent our entire lives seeing what they wanted to see. You were the son who needed their help, and I was the daughter who didn't. My phone buzzed. Another call from our father. I declined it without looking away from Michael. "I need this, Alex," he said quietly. "Jenny's pregnant, and I got nothing else." "That's where you're wrong," I replied, pulling out a folder I prepared the night before. "You have options. You just never bothered to look for them." I slid the folder across the desk. Inside was a job offer, a real one, with a proper salary and responsibilities, not the made-up positions our parents had created for him over the years. "Carter Development needs a community liaison for the Riverside project," I explained as he flipped through the paperwork. "Someone who knows the area and understands the local dynamics. The pay is competitive, and there's room for growth if you prove yourself." He looked up, confusion written across his face. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to earn something on your merit," I corrected him. "No safety net, no special treatment. You'll report to my project manager, not to me. If you succeed, it'll be because you worked for it. If you fail, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. And the estate. Keep it," I said. "Turn it into whatever you want. But understand that it'll be surrounded by modern development in 5 years. The neighborhood is changing, Michael. You can either change with it or get left behind." He sat there for a long moment, staring at the job offer. Finally, he looked up, and I saw something like respect in his eyes for the first time in years. "When would I start?" "Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." He nodded, clutching the folder like a lifeline. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. "Alex, I'm sorry." For a lot of things." "Prove it," I replied. "Not with words, with actions." After he left, I finally checked my voicemail. 5 messages from our father, each more urgent than the last. The final one caught my attention. "Alexandra, please, we need to talk about this. Your mother and we made a mistake. Can you come to dinner tonight? Please?" I considered ignoring it, but something in his voice, a note of genuine regret I'd never heard before, made me reconsider. I texted back a brief reply, 7 p.m. "I'll bring the development plans." The day passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls. When I pulled up to the family estate that evening, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her face drawn with worry. "Alexandra, thank goodness you came." The dining room table was set for 3, no Michael this time. My father stood as I entered, looking older than I remember from yesterday. "Before you say anything," he began, "we need to apologize." I set my briefcase on the table, taking my usual seat. "For what specifically?" "For not seeing you," my mother said quietly, "for not understanding what you've built. We've been so focused on helping your brother," my father added. "We failed to recognize your achievements. When I saw those development plans yesterday, Alexandra, why didn't you tell us?" "Would you have listened?" I asked. "Or would you have dismissed it as another little project?" They exchanged guilty looks. "We've been researching your company," my father said. "We've seen the developments you've completed and the awards you've won. You've built something remarkable, and we were blind to it." "And now?" I asked, opening my briefcase. "Now that you can't ignore it anymore." "Now we want to understand," my mother said. "We want to know about your work and your plans, everything we should have asked about years ago." I pulled out the development plans and spread them across the table. "Then let me show you what I'm building." For the next 2 hours, I walked my parents through the Riverside Plaza development plans. Their questions, hesitant at first, grew more thoughtful as the evening progressed. I saw genuine interest in their eyes for the first time as I explained the intricacies of urban development and sustainable design. "This section here," my father said, pointing to the architectural renderings, "complements the historical buildings rather than overshadows them." "That's intentional," I replied, allowing myself a small smile. "We're not erasing the past, we're building on it." The development celebrates the neighborhood's history while creating space for its future. My mother touched the plans gently, tracing the tree-lined walkways and community spaces. "It's beautiful, Alexandra. All these years we thought you were just, well, playing a business," I finished for her. Following a whim, she had the grace to look embarrassed. "We were wrong. So wrong." "The estate," my father began carefully. "We made that decision without understanding the full picture. Without understanding you." I leaned back in my chair, studying them both. The past 24 hours had shaken their worldview considerably. The daughter they'd underestimated had turned out to be more successful than they could have imagined, while the son they coddled had accepted a position working for his sister. "Michael told us about the job offer," my mother said as if reading my thoughts. "That was very generous of you." "It wasn't generosity," I corrected her. "It was business. The position needs to be filled, and Michael knows the community. Whether he succeeds or fails will be entirely up to him." "You're giving him a chance to prove himself," my father observed. "Something you never did." I couldn't help adding. "Every time he failed, you were there to catch him. He never had to face the consequences of his actions." They exchanged guilty looks again. The truth of my words hung heavy in the air. "We'd like to make it right," my father said. "The estate, it should be yours. It always should have been." I stood up, gathering the plans back into my briefcase. "No, no," they both echoed, startled. "The estate belongs in the past, just like your assumptions about me and Michael. Let him have it. Let him learn to be responsible for something on his terms." "But it's your inheritance," my mother protested. I gestured toward the development plans. "This is my inheritance, not the one you chose for me, but the one I built for myself. The one that matters." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an email. I glanced at it and smiled. "Excuse me, I have some good news to share with my team. The city council just unanimously approved our final permits." My father stood up. "Alexandra, wait. There's something else we need to discuss." I paused at the dining room door, briefcase in hand. "Your mother and we've been talking. The estate isn't our only asset. There's the family investment portfolio and some properties in Maine. Keep them," I said firmly, "or give them to Michael." I meant what I said. I've built my legacy. "We know that," my mother said softly. "But we were hoping. Would you consider letting us invest in your company? Not as parents trying to control things, but as investors who recognize a brilliant business opportunity when they see it." I hadn't expected that. "You want to invest in Carter Development?" "If you'll have us," my father said. "We've spent years investing in the wrong child's future. Let us be part of yours, on your terms." I studied them carefully, looking for any sign of manipulation or control. Instead, I saw something new: respect, maybe even a hint of pride. Finally, I said, "I'll have my CFO send over the investment prospectus. You can review it and make your decision based on the numbers, not family ties." They nodded, understanding the boundary I was setting. As I drove home that night, I thought about how much had changed in just 2 days. The family estate, which had once represented everything I thought I wanted, now seemed small compared to what I built. My parents, who had spent years dismissing my achievements, asked me to invest in my vision. And Michael, who had never had to earn anything, was facing his first real opportunity to prove himself. The following day, I arrived at my office early. Sarah was already there, organizing the day's schedule. "Your brother called," she said. He wants to know if he should wear a suit on Monday. I smiled. Tell him business professional is fine, and Sarah? Make sure his orientation includes every detail of our community engagement protocols. No shortcuts. Of course, she replied. Oh, and the contractors for Riverside Plaza want to confirm the groundbreaking ceremony. They suggested next month, but make it 2 weeks, I decided. It's time to start building. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Reviewed the prospectus. Impressive numbers. Can we schedule a meeting with your CFO? I typed back, next week. And Dad, bring your questions. All of them. Setting my phone down, I walked to the window. From here, I could see the neighborhood where our family estate stood, where my vision would soon reshape the skyline. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about rising above, building higher, and reaching further than anyone thought you could. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Carter, the project team is ready for the morning briefing. On my way, I replied, straightening my jacket. Work was to be done, an empire to build, and a future to shape, on my terms. 3 months later, surveying the crowd, I stood on the podium at the Riverside Plaza groundbreaking ceremony. Local officials, business leaders, and community members filled the rows of chairs. In the front row, my parents sat straight-backed and attentive, their faces beaming with a pride I'd never seen before. Michael stood off to the side in a well-fitted suit, clipboard in hand, professionally directing the event staff. These past months had revealed a side of my brother I'd never known existed. When stripped of our parents' safety net, he discovered a work ethic that surprised us all. Today marks not just the beginning of a new development. I began my speech, but the start of a new chapter for this community. Riverside Plaza will bridge our neighborhood's rich history with its bright future. As I spoke, I caught glimpses of familiar faces in the crowd. The local business owners who'd initially opposed the development but had come around after Michael's community outreach efforts. The city council members who'd scrutinized every detail of our plans before giving their unanimous approval. And the architects and designers who'd helped bring my vision to life. This project represents more than just buildings, I continued. It represents opportunity, growth, and the power of embracing change while honoring our roots. My father shifted in his seat, and I knew he understood the deeper meaning of my words. After their initial investment in Carter development, my parents had thrown themselves into learning about the business with an enthusiasm that made up for years of indifference. They'd attended planning meetings, asked thoughtful questions, and finally begun to see me as the businesswoman I'd become. In particular, I added, departing from my prepared remarks, I want to thank our community liaison team, led by Michael Carter, for their outstanding work in ensuring this project serves everyone in our neighborhood. Michael's head snapped up in surprise. He hadn't expected the recognition, but he'd earned it. Over the past 3 months, he'd worked tirelessly, arriving early and staying late, learning every aspect of the project. He transformed community skepticism into support through sheer determination and genuine concern for their interests. After the ceremony, as workers began the symbolic first dig, my mother approached me with tears in her eyes. Alexandra, she said, taking my hands in hers, I don't think I've ever been more proud, not just of what you've built, but of who you've become, and who you've helped others become, my father added, glancing at Michael, who earnestly discussed construction timelines with local business owners. He's done that himself, I corrected them. All he needed was the chance to try. Later that evening, I hosted a smaller celebration in my penthouse apartment. As Michael helped pass out the champagne, I noticed how differently he carried himself now, confident but not arrogant, proud but humble. I never thanked you properly, he said, joining me on the balcony, not just for the job, but for believing I could be more than what I was. You proved me right, I replied. The community trust you've built is invaluable to the project. He smiled, looking out over the city lights. You know, I used to be so jealous of you. Even before I knew about all this, he gestured at the skyline. I knew you had something I didn't. Purpose, direction. I didn't want to admit it. And now I understand what you've been trying to tell me all along. Success isn't about what you're given but what you build. Inside, I could hear our parents talking animatedly with some of my executives, enthusiastically discussing future development possibilities. The family estate, once the center of all our drama, had faded into the background, just another beautiful old house in a neighborhood on the rise. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Boston office reports phase 2 ahead of schedule. Chicago team wants to move up the timeline for the lakefront project. I smiled, typing back a quick response. The empire I built was growing, expanding beyond anything my family had imagined possible. But more importantly, it had become a catalyst for change, not just for the communities we developed, but also for my own family. Ms. Carter. One of the project managers approached with a tablet. The international team is ready for their video call about the London expansion. I nodded, turning back to Michael. Duty calls. Go, he said with a knowing smile. Build something amazing. I'll handle things here. As I headed to my home office, I passed our parents, deep in conversation with my CFO about sustainable development strategies. My mother caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod, a gesture of respect from one business person to another. The family estate had once represented everything I thought I wanted: acceptance, validation, a connection to our past. But in losing it, I gained something far more valuable: the freedom to create my legacy, the respect I'd earned rather than inherited, and a family that finally saw me for who I was. Settling into my chair for the video call, I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, taken just last week, showing my family standing together at the Riverside Plaza site. It was not the perfect family portrait we'd once tried to project, but something better, a genuine image of who we'd become. Ready for the London team? Sarah asked from the doorway. I smiled, turning to my computer. Always ready. Let's build something extraordinary. After all, that's what I did best, not just constructing buildings, but also bridges, opportunities, and new beginnings. The family estate might have been my childhood dream, but this empire of possibilities was my destiny.